The mornings in Pine Ridge always arrived with the same ritual. A thick blanket of fog sliding over the hills like sleeping ghosts, and the timid crowing of roosters announcing another day of struggle. Jack Bennett always woke up at the same time, without needing an alarm clock. His bare feet knew every creaking board in the wooden house, every groan of the rusty hinges. "Good morning, Dad," he murmured to the dusty portrait on the wall, as he had done every morning for 5 years. The faded image of Anthony Bennett watched him with that serene smile of someone who departed in peace, leaving only the farm and many memories. The small kitchen smelled of strong coffee and burning firewood. Jack lit the wood stove with automatic movements, preparing the black coffee that would accompany him until lunch. Through the kitchen window, he observed the fields covered with frost. This year's production had been devastating. The late frosts had burned almost the entire corn crop, and the few remaining cattle barely provided enough for sustenance. "Got to find a way," he said to himself, stirring sugar into the hot coffee. "Can't let Dad's land go to waste." The sound of hooves on the dirt road made him raise his head. It was too early for visitors, and Jack wasn't expecting anyone. Through the window, he saw a familiar figure dismounting from an impressive horse. Lieutenant Alfred, his old friend from school days, now a veteran of the mounted police. "Jack Bennett, come out, man," shouted Alfred, tying the reins to the wooden gate. "I brought a surprise for you." Jack opened the door with curiosity. Alfred was thinner, with a few grey strands in his beard, but his wide smile remained the same as always. "Alfred, what a surprise, buddy. Come in. The coffee's fresh." "I'll accept that coffee later, Jack. First, I want you to meet someone." Alfred gestured toward the horse. "This is Storm. 15 years of service in the force, compulsory retirement due to budget cuts." Jack approached slowly. The animal was truly impressive. Dark brown, shiny coat, proud bearing, intelligent eyes that seemed to evaluate every movement. Storm observed him attentively, ears erect and alert. "It's a beautiful horse, Alfred, but I don't—" "Listen, Jack," Alfred interrupted, placing his hand on his friend's shoulder. "I know things have been difficult here. I heard about the loss in the plantation, and I also know you're too alone on this farm." Jack lowered his eyes. It was true. Since his mother had passed away the previous year, loneliness weighed like lead on his shoulders. The nights were too long, the silence too deep. "Storm isn't an ordinary horse," continued Alfred. "He was trained for special operations. He has sharp instincts, can sense things we can't even imagine. And honestly, I can't take care of him as he deserves anymore. A police pension doesn't allow for many luxuries. Alfred, I can't afford to—" "I'm not selling him, Jack. I'm asking for a favor. Storm needs a place to live with dignity, and you need company. Is your father's stable still standing?" Jack looked at the old stable beside the house. It had been a while since he'd gone. In there, but the structure was solid. "Yes, it is, but I haven't used it in a long time." "Then it's settled," said Alfred, extending the reins to Jack. "Storm stays here. In exchange, you get the best security system there is, a retired police." "Horse!" Jack took the reins with hesitation. Storm observed him deeply, as if assessing his new companion. For a moment, Jack felt something different in that gaze, an almost human intelligence, an understanding that went beyond animal instinct. Will. "He be a lot of work?" asked Jack, cautiously stroking the horse's neck. "Storm gives you as much trouble as any stubborn retiree," laughed Alfred. "But I guarantee you won't regret it. He has a sixth sense for trouble." At that moment, Jack couldn't imagine how prophetic those words would prove to be. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The first days with Storm were a cautious dance of mutual recognition. Jack spent hours cleaning the stable, changing the old straw, fixing the fence that had come loose with time. The horse observed each movement with that peculiar attention, as if cataloguing information about his new home. "You're strange, aren't you, partner?" said Jack, offering an apple to Storm. "You always seem to be thinking about something." The animal accepted the fruit delicately, but his eyes continued scanning the surroundings of the farm. Jack noticed that Storm rarely relaxed completely. Even while grazing, he kept his ears alert, his head raised, like a soldier who can never forget his training. On Thursday, when Jack was fixing the back fence, he heard the sound of a motorcycle coming up the road. A young man in his early 20s waved from the gate. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. I'm Dylan, Mrs. Connie's son from town. My mother said you needed help on the farm." Jack approached, wiping his hands on a cloth. The young man had a friendly manner, an easy smile, and apparent willingness to work. With the tight financial situation, Jack had mentioned at the general store that he needed someone to help, but that he could only pay a little. "Your mother was right, Dylan, but I can't pay much, son. Things are pretty tight here." "Don't worry about it, Mr. Bennett. I'm more interested in learning farm work. Money is the least of it." Dylan looked around with interest. "What a beautiful farm you have here. Pretty isolated, isn't it? Must be very peaceful." "It is, sometimes too much," Jack laughed. "But now I have company." He pointed to Storm, who had approached the fence and was observing the newcomer with heightened attention. "Wow, what a beautiful horse. Is he purebred?" "I don't know the exact breed, but he's special. He was a police horse, just retired recently." Dylan approached the fence, extending his hand toward Storm. The horse stepped back, nostrils flared, and emitted a low sound, almost a grumble. "He doesn't like me," said Dylan, trying to sound casual, but Jack noticed a quick movement of the young man's eyes as if he were assessing something. "Storm is naturally suspicious. Police training, you know, but he'll get used to it." Jack tapped the gate. "How about starting tomorrow morning? There's a lot of backed-up work." "Perfect, Mr. Bennett. What time do you wake up?" 5:30, with the roosters." "And the neighbors? Do they wake up early too?" The question seemed strange to Jack, but he answered without thinking much. "Folks around here wake up early indeed. Country life, you know. Mr. Raymond over at the boundary line is the earliest riser, already up at 5. Mrs. Nancy's family leaves early too. Her children go to school in town." Dylan nodded, memorizing the information. "Good to know. I don't want to disturb anyone by arriving too early." After the young man left, Jack returned to work, but Storm remained restless. The horse walked in small circles in the paddock, frequently looking in the direction of the road where Dylan had disappeared. "What is it, Storm? Didn't like the kid?" That night, Jack went to bed more at ease than he had been in weeks. Finally, he would have help on the farm, and maybe he could get the accounts in order before winter, but his sleep was interrupted around 2 in the morning by Storm's low and restless neighs. Jack got up and went to the window. The moonlight partially illuminated the yard, but he saw nothing out of the ordinary. Storm was standing in the stable, his ears turned toward the woods that surrounded the property at the back. He put on his boots and went out to check. The night air was cold and damp, carrying the smell of wet earth. "What is it, partner?" Did he? "You see something?" Storm greeted him with a soft blow, but didn't take his attention away from the dark woods. Jack followed the animal's gaze and spent a few minutes observing, but only saw shadows swaying with the wind. "Must have been some woodland creature," he murmured, patting the horse's neck. "You're still getting used to this place." But when he returned to the house, Jack couldn't fall back asleep. Something about Storm's tension, the way the animal had reacted to Dylan, left an uneasiness in the air. It was as if the horse knew something that he still couldn't perceive. Outside, the fog was beginning to form again, enveloping the farm in its silent and mysterious embrace. Dylan arrived the next morning punctually at 6 o'clock, carrying a backpack and apparent eagerness for work. Jack found him fixing a hole in the paddock fence, heavy work that required strength and technique. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. I've already started here, hope you don't mind." "Not at all, son. It's good to see someone with initiative." Jack observed the well-done work. "You really know about fences." "My uncle has a small ranch near Oakdale. I spent some summers there when I was a kid." Dylan hammered a few more nails. "Do you have close neighbors?" "Just Mr. Raymond next door, and Mrs. Nancy's family about 2 miles down the road. Why do you ask?" "Just curious. I came by bus today and I saw some strange movement on the road. Dark pickup truck passing by slowly like it was lost." Jack frowned. He knew all the vehicles that frequented that area, and strange pickup trucks were not common. "What time was that?" "Around 5:30 when it was getting light. I thought it was odd because it passed twice, once going down and once coming up really slowly." Storm, who was grazing nearby, raised his head upon hearing the conversation. His eyes fixed on Dylan with that peculiar intensity that Jack was beginning to recognize. During lunch, Jack decided to stop by the general store in town to buy some supplies and discreetly listen to the neighbors' conversations. Mr. Mack's establishment had always been the meeting point for local news. "Jack Bennett, how long since I've seen you, man?" Mack weighed the sugar on the old scale. "How are things at the farm?" "Slow going, Mr. Mack. Getting by as best we can." Jack lowered his voice. "I heard there's been some strange movement around these parts. Is that true?" The shopkeeper looked around and came closer. "Yes, Jack. Very strange things indeed." Judd, over at Sunset Ridge Farm, said tools went missing from his shed. Nothing was forced like someone had a key. "What kind of tools?" "Pliers, hammers, rope, basic stuff, but quality. And there's more. Rita from the school said she saw flashlight beams in the woods behind her property late at night." Jack felt a tightness in his stomach. "And the police?" "The sheriff said he'd investigate, but you know how it is. One tool here, another there, it doesn't make much of a case. But between us, Jack, something's happening." On the way back home, Jack reflected on the conversation. Storm's concerns, the animal's strange behavior, Dylan's questions. Perhaps they weren't coincidences. Upon arriving at the farm, he found Dylan organizing firewood near the house, but the young man seemed nervous, checking his cell phone frequently. "Problems, Dylan?" No, Mr. Bennett, it's just that my mom is worried. Said she heard about thefts in the area." "Yeah, I heard about that in town, too. Better keep our eyes open." "Do you have any security system here? Electric fence? Alarm?" The question made Jack pause. It was the third time Dylan had shown specific interest in the property's security. "I have Storm," he said, carefully observing the young man's reaction. "Police horses don't let anything go unnoticed." "Is that so? How interesting." Dylan forced a smile. "Well, I'll be going then. I'll be back early tomorrow." After the young man left, Jack went to check on Storm. The animal was visibly agitated, walking in circles in the paddock, nostrils flared. "What is it, partner?" "Didn't like the conversation either." Storm approached the fence and rested his head on Jack's chest, an affectionate gesture that contrasted with his agitation. It was as if the animal was trying to communicate something urgent. That night, Jack made a decision. He would stay awake to observe the surroundings. If something was really happening in the area, he wanted to find out what it was. At 11 o'clock, he turned off all the lights in the house and positioned himself at the living room window, from where he had a good view of the road and fields. Storm was restless in the stable, constantly moving. Around midnight, a faint light flashed among the trees at the back of the property. It lasted only a few seconds, but Jack was sure of what he saw. Someone was there in the woods watching his house. His heart raced. He grabbed a flashlight and a fishing rod, the closest thing to a weapon he had, and went out the back, staying crouched. Storm neighed softly, as if approving the decision. Jack approached the woods slowly, but when he reached the spot where he had seen the light, he found only fresh footprints in the damp earth. Boot prints, with a specific design on the sole that he tried to memorize. He returned to the house with a disturbing certainty. Someone was watching his property, and Storm had known it since the first day. The next morning arrived charged with tension. Jack woke up early but hadn't been able to sleep well after what he'd seen in the woods. Storm was also different, more alert than ever, his ears constantly turned toward the direction where the footprints had been found. Dylan arrived at the usual time, but Jack noticed the young man seemed anxious, checking his cell phone more frequently than normal. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett. How was your night?" "Peaceful," Jack lied, carefully observing the young man's expression. "And yours? Is your mother still worried about the thefts?" "Oh, she always worries too much." Dylan quickly tucked his phone in his pocket. "Where are we working today?" "I was thinking we could clear that part of the woods in the back. The underbrush is growing too much. Could cause problems for the cattle." Jack discreetly observed Dylan's reaction when mentioning exactly the location where he had seen the mysterious light. The young man hesitated for a fraction of a second before responding. "Good idea, Mr. Bennett. I'll get the tools." They worked. In silence during the morning, Jack always attentive to Dylan's movements. Around 10 o'clock, when they were cutting branches near the footprint location, Storm began to neigh insistently. "What's gotten into him today?" commented Dylan, but Jack noticed the young man avoided looking in the horse's direction. "I'll go see what it is." Jack approached Storm, who had his eyes fixed on a specific point among the trees. The animal was stomping his hooves on the ground in a constant rhythm, as if trying to draw attention to something. Following Storm's gaze, Jack noticed a small elevation in the ground, covered with dry leaves. It seemed out of place, as if someone had dug and quickly covered it up. "Dylan, can you give me a hand here? I think something's buried." The young man approached reluctantly. "It's probably just an armadillo hole, Mr. Bennett." But when Jack began to remove the leaves with his hands, he found something that made his blood freeze. A small electronic device, about the size of an old cell phone, partially buried in the damp earth. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, carefully picking up the object. Dylan turned pale. "It must be trash someone threw there, Mr. Bennett. Better leave it alone." "Trash doesn't bury itself, son." Jack cleaned the dirt from the device. It still seemed to work. A red light blinking faintly. "I'm going to have Joe Florence take a look at it. He understands these things." "You don't need to bother with that, Mr. Bennett." "It's no bother at all, just my curiosity." The rest of the day passed in tension. Dylan was visibly nervous, making small mistakes in his work that he normally wouldn't make. Jack pretended everything was normal, but inside he was boiling with suspicion. At the end of the afternoon, as soon as Dylan left, Jack got into his old pickup truck and went to Joe Florence's workshop in town. The man was known in the region for fixing everything from old radios to satellite dishes, always successfully. "Jack Bennett. What a surprise, man. What brings you here?" "Joe, I found this buried on my property." Jack showed him the device. "I wanted to know what it is, if it still works." The old mechanic took the object with curiosity, adjusted his glasses, and examined it carefully. "This here is a communicator, Jack. Like a radio, but more modern. Let's see if I can access anything." Joe Florence worked for about an hour, connecting wires, testing buttons. Finally, he managed to make the device emit sounds. "I got it. There. Our messages here, Jack. Want to hear them?" Jack's heart raced. "Go ahead." The voices that came from the device made Jack's blood run cold. "Dylan, confirm the Nancy family's schedule. They leave at 7 for town, return at 6 in the evening. Weekends they stay home. And the neighbor at the boundary line? Raymond. Lives alone, wakes up at 5, goes to bed early. Isolated house, no guard dog." "Perfect. And Jack?" "That one's more complicated. He has the police horse now. The animal won't stop watching me." "A horse isn't a problem. We have ways to deal with that." Jack felt his legs weaken. Dylan's voice was unmistakable, and the information he was passing was exactly what he had asked about during his first days of work. "Joe," he said with a trembling voice, "can you copy these messages?" "I can, Jack, but this is serious stuff. You need to call the police." "I will, but first I need to think carefully about what to do." On the way back home, Jack drove automatically, his mind racing. Dylan was passing information about him and his neighbors to someone. The seemingly innocent questions, the interest in the property's security. It all made sense now. Storm was waiting for him at the gate, as if he knew something important had happened. Jack stroked the animal's neck. "You knew from the first day, didn't you, partner? That's why you didn't like him." That night, Jack stayed awake planning his next move. He couldn't confront Dylan directly. That could jeopardize the operation and alert the rest of the group. He needed help, and he knew exactly who to call. The next morning, he would call Lieutenant Alfred. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. Jack woke up even before the roosters crowed. The night had been long, filled with thoughts about the discovery of the device and Dylan's compromising messages. At 6 in the morning, he dialed Lieutenant Alfred. "Alfred, it's Jack. I need to talk to you urgently." "Jack, what happened, man? You sound nervous." "I can't talk over the phone. Can you come to the farm today? It's about Storm and other things." Of course, Jack, I'll be there around 9. Is everything okay? For now, yes, but I need your experience. Dylan arrived punctually at 6:30. Seemingly normal, but Jack noticed the young man avoided looking directly at him. Good morning, Mr. Bennett. What are we doing today? I thought we'd fix the barn roof. It's leaking when it rains, Jack tested a lie. But first, I need to go to town to get some shingles. Can you look after things here? The immediate interest in Dylan's eyes confirmed Jack's suspicions. Sure, Mr. Bennett. What time will you be back? Around 2 o'clock, maybe 3. Depends on how busy the store is. No problem, I'll take the opportunity to clean Storm's stable. At 9 o'clock sharp, Alfred arrived mounted on his usual horse. Jack was anxiously waiting for him on the porch. Alfred, I'm glad you came. We have a serious problem here. The two men went inside the house, away from curious eyes. Jack told him everything. Storm's strange behavior, Dylan's suspicious questions, the device found in the woods, the compromising messages. Alfred listened, in silence, his face becoming increasingly serious. Jack, this is more serious than you think. This Dylan is part of a larger scheme. What do you mean? In the last few months, we've received several reports of thefts from rural properties, always with the same pattern. Someone on the inside passes information, maps out routines, identifies weak points. Alfred paused. And there's always a new helper on the property shortly before the incidents. Jack felt a chill. So they're planning to rob my farm, and probably your neighbors too. What worries me is that you're isolated out here. If something happens, help could take a long time to arrive. What do you think we should do? Alfred reflected for a few moments. We have 2 options. Call the police now and arrest Dylan, or use this to our advantage to catch the whole group. How? So, if we just arrest Dylan, the others will know they've been discovered and will disappear. But if we pretend we don't know anything, we can set a trap. Jack swallowed hard. A trap? Exactly. We'll give them exactly what they're expecting. A perfect opportunity. Alfred stood up and began pacing the room. What if all the families in the area went to town at the same time? A celebration, a special event? But that would be too dangerous. Not if we're prepared. Jack, I know this region like the back of my hand. I know every resident, every hiding place, every path. Alfred stopped in front of his friend. And we have Storm. What does the horse have to do with it? Storm was trained for night operations. He can detect movement, identify intruders, even silently alert about danger. Alfred smiled. His police instinct never goes away, even in retirement. At that moment, they heard the sound of Dylan's motorcycle approaching. The 2 men looked at each other. He's back early, murmured Jack. I'll leave through the back, Alfred said quickly. Keep acting normally. Tomorrow night I'll gather the neighbors at Raymond's house. We'll plan everything in detail. What if it goes wrong? It won't, Jack. Trust me. Alfred squeezed his friend's shoulder. And trust Storm. He won't let anything slip by. Alfred left through the back door moments before Dylan knocked on the front door. Jack opened it with forced naturalness. Hi, Dylan. I changed my mind about the shingles. Decided to leave it for next week. Oh, that's fine, Mr. Bennett. The young man seemed nervous. I took the opportunity to clean out the stable. Storm was a bit agitated today. Is that so? How strange. Jack discreetly observed Dylan's dirt-covered hands. You didn't touch anything in the back, did you? No. Why do you ask? Just curious. Yesterday I saw some strange footprints back there. Dylan turned slightly pale. Must have been some animal, right, Mr. Bennett? Must be. The rest of the day passed slowly. Dylan worked in silence, checking his cell phone several times. Jack pretended everything was normal, but inside he was preparing for what was to come. When the young man left, Jack went to the stable. Storm was waiting for him, as if he knew something important was being planned. Well, partner, said Jack, stroking the animal's neck. Looks like we're going to have a chance to discover what you're really capable of. Storm neighed softly, as if accepting the challenge. The next night, Raymond's house was busier than ever. Jack arrived discreetly through the back, as arranged with Alfred. Besides the host, Mrs. Nancy was present with her son Matthew, the couple Judd and Rita from Sunset Ridge Farm, and several other neighbors from the area. "Folks," Alfred began, keeping his voice low, "what I'm about to tell you is serious and needs to stay between us. Jack discovered that we're being watched by a group planning attacks on our properties." A murmur of concern ran through the group. Mrs. Nancy placed her hand on her chest. "Dear Lord, I knew something strange was happening. Those lights in the woods—" "Exactly, Mrs. Nancy," said Jack. "And the worst part is that they have inside information. The young man who works. For me, Dylan has been passing information about all of us." Raymond clenched his fists. "That boy was at my house last week, asking about schedules, if I had a dog. I thought it was just conversation." "We all fell for his act," admitted Judd. "He seemed so interested, so polite." "Their plan is simple," explained Alfred. "They know our routines, they know our weak points, and they're waiting for the right opportunity to act. That's why we're going to give them exactly what they want." "What do you mean, Lieutenant?" asked Matthew, Mrs. Nancy's son. "We're going to pretend that all of you are going to town at the same time. A celebration, a special event. Leave the properties apparently empty." Mrs. Nancy stood up alarmed. "Lieutenant, that's too risky." "Calm down, Mrs. Nancy. Nobody is actually going to leave their houses empty. You'll leave normally, as if you were going to town, but you'll double back and return using alternative routes. Each of you will hide at strategic points on your own property." Jack continued the explanation. "I'll stay on my farm, appearing to be alone. When they arrive, they'll think it's just me there, but you'll all be positioned with communication radios that Alfred will provide." "And the police?" asked Rita. "It's all arranged," assured Alfred. "As soon as we give the signal, 3 patrol cars will arrive here in 10 minutes, but we need to catch them in the act, with enough evidence to incriminate the whole group." Raymond stood up slowly. "Lieutenant, I'm an old man, but I won't let these scoundrels take over our region. You can count on me." "And on me too," said Judd. "But how will we know when they're going to attack?" Jack smiled for the first time that evening. "That's where Storm comes in. He senses suspicious movement long before any of us. When he starts getting agitated, we'll know they're coming." "A horse as an alarm system?" Matthew doubted. "Son," said Alfred seriously, "Storm detected infiltration in operations that even military radar couldn't catch. Trust his training." They spent the next hour planning every detail. They defined observation points, communication signals, emergency escape routes in case of danger. Mrs. Nancy, despite her fear, insisted on participating. "These bandits won't intimidate an old woman like me. I can shoot a shotgun better than many men." The next day, the charade began. Jack informed Dylan that he would be attending a party in town with all the neighbors. "A party, Mr. Bennett?" "Yes, Dylan. Mrs. Connie's wedding anniversary celebration in town. Everyone from the area is going. We're leaving around 7 in the evening and won't be back until dawn." Dylan's eyes gleamed. "That's great, Mr. Bennett. You deserve to have some fun. Indeed, don't you want to come too? I'm sure your mother will be there." "Oh, I can't, Mr. Bennett. I have some commitments." Dylan tried to hide his anxiety. "But have a great time." During the day, Jack noticed that Dylan was especially interested in the preparations. He asked several times about the schedules, who would be present, how long they would be gone. "Will people be taking their children too?" he asked discreetly. "Yes, they will. It's a family celebration, you know. Even old Raymond is going, despite his age." When Dylan left that afternoon, Jack realized the young man was radiant. He was probably already passing the information to the rest of the group. At 6 in the evening, the coordinated movement began. The neighbors left their houses with loaded cars, as if they were really going to a party in town. But after traveling a few miles, each took alternative routes and discreetly returned to their observation posts. Jack turned off some lights in the house, left others on, and positioned himself with a view of the main road. Storm was in the stable, but Jack knew the animal was alert. At 8 o'clock, the radio crackled. "Positions taken, standing by." At 9:30, Storm began to neigh softly. Jack picked up the radio. "Attention, everyone. Storm is giving the signal. They must be coming." Jack's heart was pounding. In a few minutes they would discover if the plan would work or if they had made a dangerous mistake. In the shadows of the night, 3 dark vehicles approached silently on the dirt road. The silence of the early morning was broken by the rhythmic, insistent sound of Storm's hooves beating on the stable floor. Jack, hidden behind the living room window, felt his heart race. It was the signal he had been waiting for. "Attention, everyone," he whispered into the radio. "Storm is confirming they're coming." The response came in quick bursts. Raymond in position, Nancy ready, Judd positioned. On the main road, 3 pickup trucks approached with their headlights off, moving like shadows in the darkness. Jack could make out the silhouettes of at least 8 people getting out of the vehicles. One of the figures stood out from the others by his familiar posture. Even in the dim light, Jack recognized Dylan walking ahead of the group, pointing directions and whispering instructions. But what really shocked Jack was the second figure that emerged from the main pickup. Marcus, the well-known merchant of the region, that friendly man who always greeted everyone at the general store, was walking beside Dylan as if he were the leader of the operation. "My God," Jack murmured into the radio. "Marcus is with them, the shopkeeper from town." A murmur of disbelief ran through the radios. Marcus was respected in the community, had business dealings with almost all the farmers in the region. The group split into 3 parts. Dylan took 2 men toward Jack's house, while Marcus followed with 3 others to Raymond's property. The third group headed toward Mrs. Nancy's farm. "They've split up," Jack reported. "Dylan's coming here with 2 men. Marcus went to Raymond's house." "Received," Alfred responded over the radio. "Maintain positions until my signal." Jack observed Dylan approaching the house with his 2 accomplices. The young man moved with familiarity, indicating the weak points he had mapped during his weeks of work. They showed where the power generator was located, which window had the weakest lock, where the most valuable tools were stored. Storm increased the intensity of his neighs. The sound was getting too loud, and Jack feared it would alert the intruders. But then he realized the horse wasn't just giving a signal, he was deliberately drawing attention. "What a noisy horse," grumbled one of the men accompanying Dylan. "He's going to wake up the old man." "Relax," said Dylan. "Jack sleeps deeply, and if he wakes up, he's just an old man alone." Jack clenched his fists upon hearing the contempt in the voice of the young man he had trusted. But he remained hidden, waiting for the right moment. The group began to force open the door of the shed where the tools were stored. It was then that Storm acted unexpectedly. The horse managed to open the latch of the stable, something Jack didn't even know he could do, and ran out toward the intruders. "The horse is loose," shouted one of the men. Storm didn't attack directly, but began to run in circles around the group, neighing loudly and creating tremendous confusion. The men tried to move away from the animal, tripped over each other, completely lost their coordination. "Catch that beast," shouted Dylan, but Storm seemed to dance between them, always one step ahead, always out of reach. It was in this moment of chaos that the lights of the property all turned on at once. Not just Jack's farm, but all the neighboring properties. The entire valley lit up as if it were daytime. "Police, everyone on the ground!" shouted Alfred, emerging from behind the barn with a powerful flashlight and a gun in his hand. From the other side of the yard, Raymond appeared holding his hunting shotgun. "You chose the wrong property to rob, you scoundrels." Mrs. Nancy emerged from behind the fence, also armed. "Thought you'd intimidate a defenseless old woman." The intruders were paralyzed, surrounded on all sides. Dylan looked around desperately as if he couldn't understand what had happened. "You're surprised, Dylan," said Jack, finally coming out of his hiding place. "Did you really think we wouldn't discover your little game?" "Mr. Bennett, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain, son. I heard your conversations on the radio. I know everything." From Alfred's radio came the confirmation. "Group at Mrs. Nancy's property captured. Marcus tried to escape, but Matthew blocked the road with the tractor." Police sirens began to echo in the valley. In a few minutes, the place was surrounded by patrol cars and officers. As the intruders were being handcuffed, Jack approached Storm, who was standing calmly, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "You knew all along, didn't you, partner?" he said, stroking the animal's neck. From the first day Dylan showed up here, Storm rested his head on Jack's chest, an affectionate gesture that completely contrasted with the confusion he had created minutes before. Alfred approached, smiling. I told you he would never lose his police instinct. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. When Marcus was brought in handcuffs to join the others, he looked directly at Jack with an expression that mixed anger and desperation. You've ruined years of work, he shouted. Years! It was then that the true dimension of the operation began to reveal itself. The first rays of sunlight illuminated Jack's farm when Sheriff Peterson finished hearing the testimonies. The revelation about the true extent of the operation had left everyone shocked. Marcus was running a network operating in 3 states, explained the sheriff to the group gathered in the yard. He used his business as a front to map rural properties, identify families with valuable assets, and plan the attacks. Jack shook his head, still in disbelief. And I've been buying from him for years, trusting him. We all trusted him, said Mrs. Nancy, her voice tired. He knew our routines, knew when we traveled, what valuables we had. Information we naturally shared, thinking it was just friendly conversation. Dylan, sitting in the patrol car with handcuffs, kept his head down. When Jack approached, the young man finally raised his eyes. Mr. Bennett, my family was going through hard times. He offered easy money, said it was just passing information that no one would get hurt. Dylan, Jack said sadly, you betrayed the trust of people who only did good by you, and you put entire families in danger. I know, Mr. Bennett, I know. There's no forgiveness for what I did. There's always forgiveness, son, but first you need to face the consequences and try to make amends for the harm you've done. Lieutenant Alfred approached with a smile on his face. Jack, the sheriff said that thanks to the materials seized from the group, they've identified other cells in the organization. Several families from other regions have been saved. Really? Really? And it all started with Storm's suspicion. Alfred looked at the horse, who was grazing peacefully near the group. I never doubted his instinct. In the weeks that followed, the story spread throughout the region. Jack, who had always been seen as a simple and discreet farmer, became a sort of local hero, but he always made a point of sharing the credit. The real hero is Storm, he would tell anyone who would listen. I just had the luck to have a companion who never lost his instinct to protect. The farm, which had previously been an isolated and melancholy place, transformed into a meeting point for the community. On Sundays, neighboring families would come to visit Jack and Storm. The children loved to hear the story of the police horse that saved the region, and Storm seemed to enjoy the attention, allowing them to ride on his back with infinite patience. Raymond, who had developed an even closer friendship with Jack after the events, would show up almost every day to have coffee and talk about the old days. You know, Jack, he said on a sunny afternoon, I think our Dylan did us an unintentional favor. How so, Raymond? United the neighborhood. Before, everyone lived isolated on their own property. Now everybody knows each other, everybody helps each other. We've become a real community. It was true. Mrs. Nancy had organized a group of women who met weekly to exchange recipes and chat. Judd and the other farmers had created a cooperative to purchase supplies together. Matthew, Mrs. Nancy's son, had begun teaching computer classes for the older folks. 3 months after the events, Jack received an unexpected visit. Dylan appeared at the gate, without his motorcycle, walking slowly. Mr. Bennett, I know I have no right to be here, but I wanted to talk to you. Jack, who was brushing Storm, stopped what he was doing. Go ahead, son. I got out of prison today, probation, and I wanted to apologize again, in person. Dylan swallowed hard. And I wanted to ask if you still need help on the farm. Jack remained silent for a long moment. Storm raised his head and looked steadily at Dylan, but this time without the hostility of before. Dylan, you betrayed my trust. You put innocent people's lives at risk. I know, Mr. Bennett. But, Jack paused, everyone deserves a second chance, and I think you've learned your lesson. Dylan's eyes filled with tears. I swear by everything sacred that I'll never disappoint you again. It's not me you need to prove anything to, son. It's to yourself. Jack resumed, brushing Storm. You can start Monday, but this time the salary will be fair and the work will be honest. That night, Jack was on the porch drinking his coffee when he saw a familiar light approaching. It was Alfred returning from one of his patrols. "How are things around here, Jack?" "Peaceful, Alfred. Different but peaceful." Jack poured coffee for his friend. "You know, sometimes I think that if you hadn't brought Storm, none of this would have happened." What the discovery of the gang? Not just that, the community coming together, the new friendships, even Dylan's chance at redemption. Jack looked toward the stable where Storm was resting. "I think some things happen for a reason." Alfred smiled. "I've always believed that, and I've always believed Storm was special." He really is. He's not just a retired horse, he's a guardian. That night, Jack slept deeply for the first time in a long time. Not from the exhaustion of work, but from the peace of someone who knows they're in the right place, with the right people, protected by a companion who would never fail to fulfill his mission. Outside, Storm grazed calmly under the moonlight, his ears always alert, his eyes always vigilant. After all, a true guardian never completely rests, and so in the silent hills of Pine Ridge, life followed its course, richer in friendship, stronger in community, and safer under the protection of a horse that proved the true value of a hero lies not in age but in the size of the heart. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching from.